And in terms of the major players, like who would be interested in you? Well, it'd be anyone around you, right? I think there's some mines that could certainly benefit from increased mine life and more tonnage and more feed for their mills. So there's certainly interesting dynamics, and you can kind of make a case for F3 to be attractive to more than one group for strategic reasons or for mill feed or what have you. I think that right now we're back at the beginning of a new discovery at Tetra Zone, and everyone, which includes the major players, are just kind of sitting back and they want to see what this thing pans out in the short term.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Triangle Investor Interviews. I'm your host, Lucian Valkovic, and before I announce my guest, just a quick reminder of a disclaimer. This interview and all my interviews are not a recommendation to buy or sell any shares, products, or services. Always do your due diligence and consult with your financial advisor. My guest today is Sam Hartmann. Sam is a VP of Exploration for F3 Uranium, a uranium exploration company with assets in Athabasca Basin. Sam, welcome back to the show. It is always great to have you.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. It has been a while since you were in my show, I believe. I'm not sure of the exact time. However, it has been a few months. We have a lot of things to cover today, but let's start. I know your background. I know the background of the team of F3. You have unmatched track record discovering the J Zone in 2010, a triple R that was 2 years after that, and now you have the JR Zone, and you have other discoveries. My first question to you is, what unique lessons from these high stakes moments have shaped your approach in exploration in F3, and how do they give the company an edge over the newcomers in the Athabasca Basin?
Yeah, I think that's something that you always ask yourself, especially once you're off of a discovery. You usually kind of reflect back and you say, what happened? What should we do different next time? What do we wish we did and didn't do? And that's kind of what we do every time. Certainly after the last discovery at JR Zone, right as we went into Tetra Zone discovery here this spring, we hit there, and that was the first thing I asked my guys was, what do we wish we did and didn't do in the past, or what did we do that we shouldn't have done? So I think there's always an experience that you bring along from your previous successes or drilling you've done, and you kind of want to do better next time, right? So, but I think ultimately it comes down to the volume of what you're seeing. You know, we've probably as a group on the west side of the basin drilled close to 1,000 holes, probably more than that at this point. And I just think when you've been exposed, we have that much exposure to that much data and photos, and you know, you can see and smell those rocks. That gives you the ultimate advantage, right? Just the quantity.
Yeah, good point. Sam, let's cover PLN project. Let's dive in your flagship project. Can you paint a picture of the JR Zone for our viewers? What makes it high-grade mineralization so exciting, and how has 2025, this year's drilling, expanded your understanding of the potential scale?
So JR Zone is the zone that we found in late 2022. We've been drilling it since. We did a little bit of drilling in this past summer. We had a couple holes that had been pre-cased. Aside from that, I think that the majority of the infill drilling we're comfortable with where we are. In terms of what kind of a deposit it is, it's very typical of a basement-hosted, shear zone controlled Athabasca Basin deposit. So you're sitting in this graphitic shear. You have basically a sandwich of host rock, then a graphitic shear zone. Inside of that, you have a uranium deposit. Inside of that, you have a high grade, we call it an ultra high grade, 20+% grade center of that. And the kind of on the other side, on the footwall side, you kind of grade out of the shear zone in the same way. So in terms of geology, JR Zone is fairly typical with what we see, especially on the west side of the Athabasca Basin.
Yeah, the Broach Lake area
Mhm,
delivered the game changer with Tetra Zone discovery.
mhm.
What geological clues led your team there, and why do you see this as a new trend just 12 kilometers south of the JR zone? How do you visualize this?
So it's fairly unique. So that was an area that you basically have Triple R and Arrow on the Patterson Lake corridor. Then north of that, you have the JR Zone. In between that, we have the Athabasca Basin boundary. So the Triple R is outside of the basin. JR Zone is just inside, and the in between area, there's quite a big gap in there with no conductors. And there was a property available, so we picked it up, and we actually started looking through a lot of the historic geophysics that had been done there. And there was a little bit of drilling, but it was kind of an area that people would have called moose pasture in the past, right? Where there's no conductors. You've done some geophysics, it's not really showing anything. The drilling wasn't great, and then it's in this magnetic domain that they call the Clearwater intrusive complex or Clearwater structure, some people call it. It's a big mag high that doesn't really have conductors in it. It's not really a great target. And so we went in there with sort of a different approach. And our idea has always been that these deposits are shear zone hosted. So you have a fault, that fault gets reactivated over time during different epochs. You have movement and then it stops, and then you have movement. You have various fluids coming through, and then you'll have a long period of nothing, and then you have reactivation. And these shear zones usually develop in slippery areas. So where you have graphitic rocks, they develop really nice, smooth, and ductile shear zones. And then you have fluids moving in there with uranium in it that precipitates. And our thing was, well, if you're saying that the structure is the important part, the host rocks aren't really that important. So that's kind of why we started looking at the Clearwater domain, because you do have faults in there and you do have structures in there. And maybe it's so, the rocks aren't graphitic like you're expecting, but they have been sheared and there has been fluid movement. So we thought why couldn't there be a uranium deposit in there? Right?
But Sam, help me understand. Are we looking at a connected system of shear hosted deposits or multiple standalone giants waiting to be unlocked?
I don't think. I mean, if you look at the A1, B1 conductor that JR Zone is on, and then you look at the Tetra Zone and those conductors that we've since sort of defined, they're sub-parallel and they're 12, 13 kilometers apart. They're not really on trend with each other. I don't think they're related. I think that they have different signatures. We still have a lot of data that's outstanding in the lab, right? Age dating, a whole bunch of stuff. My feel is that they are different ages, that they were formed during different times, but similar stresses. So you have big stress, tectonic stresses, and that's why you have these subparallel things developing. So I don't think they're the same thing at all. Typically, what we look for is, the pearls on the string analogy, and you look for more pods on the same structure. Tetrazone is not that to JR zone. It's on a completely different thing,
That's
right?
very interesting. Sam, you kicked off a 3,000-meter drill program at Tetra.
Yeah.
What are the top targets and what kind of results would make headlines for investors? And how does this tie into the winter program from earlier this year?
So so let me back up. 2025 in the winter, we started geophysics in February. Right after we got permits in March, we had geophysics done. We started drilling. We got some sniffs, and then by April, we had our first high grade intercept. And because that discovery at Tetra, it's not this unique thing where it's in a structurally it is a shear zone hosted deposit. There's no doubt about that. But it's not in a very easy to define ground EM conductor. So typically you have the line on the map and you drill along the line, your conductor, which is a proxy for the structure. This isn't really the case. We have very weak conductors, and they aren't the conductors represent different things. They sort of represent the edges of this broken ground, right? I think that for that reason, it was a bit more difficult to expand it along strike right away because it's kind of difficult to see what is the strike of the zone. You have alteration and you have mineralization, but it's not as well defined in a straight line. So we took August off from drilling. We did more ground EM. And the hope there was sort of that we can refine our targets going into this fall program. So, like you mentioned, it's about 3,000 meters. We're looking at very roughly, including some more geophysics and other studies, probably a $3 million program. And out of that's a 15 million flow through raise we did, right? It was 20 in total, 15 flow through. So we're kind of working with a $3 million fall program, and then we'll do another winter program at maybe 4 million, and then uh, late spring, early summer, and then a late summer, early fall program, and kind of stretch that money throughout 2026.
Yeah.
For drill targeting, to get back to that, starting this fall, I think it's going to start out at the Tetra Zone sort of size level, and we want to confirm. We still have quite a few theories out there on strike direction and the actual controls of the mineralization. So I think you'll see probably 3 or 4 or 5 holes somewhere in there, in and around the Tetra Zone, and then a couple stepping out a little bit, stepping out from other holes we had already drilled last summer. But if we're going to explore along the 1,200 meter prospective strike length between historic drilling and Tetra Zone, to go into that, I think we're going to want a little bit more of like a bigger program than 3,000 meters.
Yeah, I want to ask you a few more specifics about that, but before I do, how deep are you drilling this time?
So we drill. Yeah, so once you have a zone defined, in your infill drilling, you kind of really cut your meters as much as you can, and you want to kind of drill through the deposit and shut your hole down, right? When you're drilling these exploration holes, typically you go deeper than you have to. Especially at Tetra Zone, we have extremely wide um, envelope of alteration around the zone. So at JR Zone, you're looking at tens of meters, like 10, 20 meters of alteration around the deposit. And here it's, probably hundreds of meters. So the holes, we never stop drilling when we're still in altered rock, even when we're past our target zones. So right now, we're probably looking at these holes are going to be, I'm going to say 500-600 meter
Mhm.
holes. And the target depths are more like in the 300 meter range.
Got it. Sam, the maiden resource estimate for JR Zone and potentially Tetra is a massive milestone for the company. What key parameters like cutoff grades or geological domains are you prioritizing to ensure the estimate captures the high grade potential we've seen, such as you had like 13.7 U308 over 2.5 meters at JR? What's the roadmap here?
So we're actually still working on that, and we're still modeling, looking at different ways to model. Typically in these deposits, you have a very high grade core, and you kind of want to model your deposit as a very high grade vein, and then a lower grade domain around that, and then maybe a low grade. So at Triple R, or sorry, at at JR Zone,
Sure.
you kind of have these 3 grade domains, which is the low grade stuff, which is anything below 1%. Then you have the mid grade, kind of like 1 to 5, and then you have the high grade stuff. That's what we call the ultra high grade. So that's kind of like the 5 to at 5+% range. So right now we're still modeling this in different iterations, and we're trying to get to a point where we feel that the grades are represented appropriately and that you don't have any bleed of grades into lower grade shells.
Okay, just return to one technical question. How might sonic drilling and EN surveys refine the block model, and what surprises could emerge that boost the overall pounds in the ground?
So sonic drilling is basically just a methodology we used at JR Zone to drill straighter holes. And straighter holes means you have less deviation, which means the holes go where you want. You can drill with more accuracy and you have less restarts, right? So you kind of have the extra cost of a sonic drill versus saving drill meters. And usually it ends up being that you're ahead of the game. That's at JR Zone. At Tetra Zone, the sonic drill, we did try to use it as well. It was not as effective there. So we're actually using diamond drilling However, the target mineralization is a bit deeper than a JR zone, so we're using wedging and looking at steering some drilling as well, kind of to make up for not having a sonic drill.
Yeah,
EM surveys, they don't really correlate, I wouldn't say, to your resource estimate. They are just sort of build a roadway in a way for you to explore along.
got it. Uh, Viewers like numbers. Do you have any idea of the size? What's the realistic range for indicated versus inferred resources based on the current drilling? I know that you cannot talk much about this, but do you have any idea of the size here?
I don't think that's been discussed in public
It has,
to
but
some
I mean, with
degree.
the new data you have.
Yeah, I think that if you look at our spacing, it's similar to, like, we haven't classified a resource yet at this point, right? But I would say that if you just go by drill spacing and compare to what Fission or NextGen did, you're probably looking at a majority of an indicated resource at this point. I don't think there'll be much inferred material there at this point. So um I'm hoping that, my thing is, let's get this resource done at some point and have the scientific merit to it and have it basically be done right. And I think that's the direction we're going to move.
Okay,
And I think in terms of grade, I think that's going to be a relatively higher grade than, you know, maybe triple R. We'll see.
of course. Let's
Yeah.
take a bit longer approach. Let's say with the maiden resource in hand, what milestones like PEA or Tetra integration could propel F3 toward feasibility studies?
That's a tough one. I mean, feasibility study follows on sort of the pathway of resource estimate and then a scoping study and the pre-feasibility study. And I think that to go down that path, it's fairly capital intensive and you have to have a scale that um, leads you to reasonably be sure that this is going to be, potentially a producing asset. What's unique on the west side is, like, now you have NextGen proposing a mill and mine, Paladin is proposing a mill and mine, and those were sort of the two main players. Now we have JR Zone, Tetra Zone. It's not going to make any sense for all of these deposits to go down that same path and apply for a runway and a mill. um, it doesn't make any sense, right? So when you're saying is a feasibility study, it's like, well, feasible for what? Its own standalone mine,
Yeah.
JR zone? I wouldn't think that that's going to be the case, right? But it doesn't need to be, because all you need to do is be profitable in a creative way, as a standalone pod, and then you feed a central mill. Tetra zone, on the other hand, like when you just look at the size potential, what I see is that you have a shear hosted deposit. You have alteration over much wider intervals and depths. You have high grade, that like 20205 has beautiful high grade pitch blende in it. And it has exactly the right textures that you see in major deposits. And then along strike of that, we drilled hole 217, which had the widest interval, right?
Yeah.
So now what we want to do is kind of find, well, where can we put those things together and end up with an interval that is high grade and significantly wide, 60 plus meters or something like that. And I think that's really the ultimate goal at Tetra Zone, is to, in the short term, build up the size potential, you know.
Understood. Question about M&A. This question is maybe better for a CEO than the VP of exploration, but you are the part of the same team. You are probably discussed that. I know that F3 spin out 17 project properties to F4, but
Mhm.
does F3 have any M&A strategy going forward, or maybe stake more land adjacent to your current properties? What's the plan here?
So we did spin out F4 at the time when we spun it out. The purpose was to isolate PLN, and that was the JR zone. Um, it was to isolate that property in case there's a change in ownership and we get bought out. All the other stuff you get no value for it. You give it away for free. That's why we spun it out. In the meantime, now we have a second zone, Tetra Zone, right? So the reason, the cause or the case for spinning out F4s is as valid now as it was then. Like after we found JR Zone, we obviously didn't get bought out, but now we're kind of back to square one with a new discovery. And in terms of the major players, like who would be interested in you? Well, it'd be anyone around you, right? I think there's some mines that could certainly benefit from increased mine life and more tonnage and more feed for their mills. So there's certainly interesting dynamics, and you can kind of make a case for F3 to be attractive to more than one group for strategic reasons or for mill feed or what have you. I think that right now we're back at the beginning of a new discovery at Tetra Zone, and everyone, which includes the major players, are just kind of sitting back and they want to see what this thing pans out in the short term. But
That's a
you know,
very good answer. Yeah. Final question, news flow from the company. What can investors expect going forward?
so like you mentioned, 3,000 meter drill program in progress. This is with one diamond drill, so we're drilling at a fairly, you're looking at close to a week for a hole or a bit more. We started drilling late last week. We're going to drill 5, 6, 7 in that range number of holes. And we look forward to having news flow with drill results throughout that program. It's got to be at a reasonable rate. We're not going to do a news release after every hole or two, but maybe something in the middle and then towards the end, and then, kind of stay dynamic with it.
It makes sense. That was Sam Hartmann, VP of Exploration for F3 Uranium. Sam, I want to thank you for coming today. It was a good chat. You really updated your plans with F3. Thank you very much.
Thank you.